Right, what's good, guys? Welcome back to another episode of Behind the Stage. This is where I get to talk to anyone that will answer my DMs about events and what they do to help run said events and make it a great experience for you and me. This week we have Mike. Mike, what's good?
Hello, hey, I'm doing great. Really appreciate taking part in this series, but more importantly, thank you, Drip, so much for putting this together. There's so much that happens behind the scenes, and it's a privilege, to be honest, to be able to kind of share not only this information with people that are maybe curious about what it takes to put on large scale events like we do, but more importantly, how do you get to this point?
Yes, exactly. So, Mike, for people that don't know you, and for myself as well, who are you? What do you do? And who do you work for?
Yeah. So my name is Mike, as we mentioned before. My nickname is Mohawk Mike. Normally, I have my hair spiked up and everything, but a little busy today. But yeah, I work for a company called Gaming Generations, and I am one of the events managers there. So Gaming Generations provides a lot of turnkey solutions for events. A lot of people in the fighting game community might know us as providing like a lot of the consoles. We usually have like a merch booth that we work with the event there. But there's a lot of things that we do behind the scenes. We help manufacture a lot of the goods. So like badges, lanyards, wristbands, the event merchandise itself. And then also those event services like we talked about, we provide a lot of the logistics. So we're packing up our semi trucks. We're showing up to the show. How many consoles, monitors do you need? Headsets, everything that you would basically need to run an event. We have within our means. We have a warehouse. We're based out of La Crosse, Wisconsin. A lot of people know that, we're constantly back and forth from events. I was just in Baltimore this past weekend helping oversee the Pokemon Regional Championships, but we also are like this weekend in Las Vegas for a Lorcana card game event, obviously like Evo, Combo Breaker, events like that. So my position that I'm in is kind of helping oversee that everything from the event side is operational, a lot of the pre-planning going into it, a lot of the actual on-site as well, working with the various vendors, working with, the live stream broadcast team, working with the venue itself. So it's a lot to kind of condense into one small thing. But the short version is that, if you have an event and you need assistance with that, whether it just be equipment rental, whether it be producing goods, like I said, badges, lanyards, branding, stuff like that, we do a little bit of it all.
Yeah, no, 100%. And for those that aren't in the US like myself, but you have been to an American major, or even been a stream monster, and you all have seen Gaming Generations sticker, logo, not plastered, but definitely on a monitor or a console, on the stream setup, in pictures, everywhere. Pretty much any US major in the fighting game scene, you guys have definitely helped out, right? And you've just mentioned stuff like Pokemon, Lorcana's a big one. And yeah, definitely seeing you guys having a booth at Combo Breaker, and Evo, and everywhere else. You guys just, from that 60-second, probably 2-minute long description of what you guys do a lot. And I think it might be safe to say that if without you guys, running an event might have been extra difficult because you guys can offer so much. Like from badges and the consoles. Like consoles are needed for especially fighting game tournaments, like where my history is.
Yeah, it's interesting how we kind of like came into this space. So Gaming Generations itself is started as a brick and mortar used media store, right? So like selling, like, you would think almost like a GameStop, a small independent, like we're selling games, we're buying games, consoles, we're doing repairs. That's one of the big sectors of our business as well is, with our local brick and mortar stores is like repairing things like consoles, cell phones, laptops, things like that as well. So we had someone back in the day, basically they were local, and La Crosse itself is a college town. And so we had someone come in one day and they're like, oh, hey, I kind of want to run a Halo tournament, but like I don't have a lot of Xboxes. Can I just like borrow some? Can I rent some? And it was one of those things that like at the time, we were like, this is something we've never done before. And, we could go for it. Obviously, like we're big fans of, competitive gaming and esports in totality. And it's like, let's see what we can do to help this individual out. And then once we kind of saw that there was a greater need for that, like within like the realm of esports itself. It just kind of grew into one of those things. We started out, with the FGC and supporting events like Evo, UFGT, CEO, and it, like once it was like, okay, we have a fleet of consoles that have the game, that have the patch, that have all the DLC, we have monitors. It was one of those things that like it started very small, and as the need kind of grew for it, it's crazy, going from Evo, a decade ago and bringing, a 26-foot box truck that would have everything in it to now multiple semi trucks, over close to 1,000 consoles, 1,000 consoles for Evo, supplying all this equipment. So yeah, it's been very unique being on like this side of knowing like what events need now just to function, just to operate. Yeah. There's also like bells and whistles that we can add to it, but I think kind of like you were saying before, and to echo that is I think it is safe to say that like the growth in totality, especially in the FTC, but other sectors of our industry, like we kind of helped initiate that. We alleviated, back in the day, it used to be if you went to an FGC major, it would be, hey, you're going to get, bring a console, bring a monitor, and you'll pay for half a badge or maybe your comp badge or whatever it may be. So sourcing all of this equipment not only helped these events grow because you're not relying on the community, but also from a competitive integrity and standpoint, like everything's the same, right? Yeah. Smash, Melee is the only one that's a little difficult because, we have a fleet of CRTs and we can supply all of that, but, somebody's playing on a 12-inch and then somebody's playing on a 27-inch. It's a little harder, but it's been very unique to help not only get these events what they need, but to also help them grow at the same time.
You raise a very good point and a question I will ask maybe a bit shortly. When you talk about having everything the same, the current discussion in the fighting game scene right now really is still like PC gaming. I can ask that question later, so we'll keep that at the back of the mind. So when did you join Gaming Generations, Mike? Like, what's your history with Gaming Generations? And, like, what's your background? Like, are you fighting games? Are you shooters? Or card games? Like, tell us about yourself.
Yeah, so I grew up, I have 3 younger brothers, so I'm the oldest, and my dad and, like, our whole family, like, we all grew up as gamers. So, like, even when we had, like, the, Sega Genesis, right? When we first got the Sega Genesis, before, like, Twitch was a thing, like, we would all sit on the couch and watch each other play. We would help, maybe give pointers on what they were missing, or, like, take turns. When somebody would die, we'd pass the controller. So I always, initially off the jump for me, I was fortunate because I always saw video games as a means of camaraderie. It was a way for me to interact with my family and my friends, and I used it as a median of finding people with common interests, but also like, kind of a sense of like bonding with one another. So I played a lot of games growing up, but very specifically, I was very much into first-person shooters. I played Doom, I played Quake, I played Unreal Tournament. And so when I was in middle school, we had a new computer lab that was built. This is the like late 90s. Okay. And so in 1999, as a middle school student, 12 years old, I went to the instructor that was in charge of the computer lab, and I go, hey, I would kind of like to host some kind of video game event. I would love to be able to use this equipment. Back then, not everybody had a PC. Yeah. And so the instructor was like, it's school property. I can't say yes, but we can kind of kick it up the chain and see where it goes. So it turned into me, again, as a 12-year-old child, literally having this like passion and desire to do this. I put together a presentation that I took in front of the school board. Because again, they were like hard no, like back in the day, and we still get it a little bit now, but like video games are violent. We don't want this kind of material on our computers in our schools. And I went and I gave a presentation about how, this is a means of, it's an after school club, just like anything else. And even before like esports was kind of like a common term, as I was pitching it as, this is an activity that it's a tournament, but it's also casually just people getting together and making friends. And, we can add the component of, if you need help with your schoolwork, if you need tutoring, whatever that may be, we can help these students out. they allowed me to go ahead and do my first one.
Oh, yeah.
We got the computer lab. It was the first Friday after school hours, and had all the instructors that were there kind of overseeing and mentoring as well. And it went very well, got a lot of positive feedback. So they, at that point, allowed us to continue doing them. So it was the first Friday of every month. We were allowed to take over the computer lab. And it slowly but surely turned into one of those things where it's like, we were getting people that were choosing to do that instead of other after school activities. So like if they had baseball practice, they were skipping practice to come to my event. And then eventually it did get to the point where like our attendance got pretty large to where we weren't even using that computer lab anymore. We added what we were calling at the time an educational component, where you could use one of the school computers, but we were hosting the event in the cafeteria at the high school.
Yeah.
So rather than going to the computer lab and everybody sitting down and playing, you had to actually unhook your computer, transport it, set it up, plug it in, get it on the network. And, that was our educational component. But people were also bringing their own equipment and consoles as well. So doing that was like one of like my first kind of foray into like being an event organizer, even though it was like very kind of minuscule.
Still counts.
But I did it. I put it on the resume. I did it through middle school. I did it through high school. I graduated high school. I went back and was still mentoring like other students who were trying to carry the torch. I did it through college, and it was one of those things that like through hosting my own events and traveling to other events, I kind of started building this network. And one of those people that I ended up meeting was the owner. His name is Evan of Gaming Generations.
Okay.
And they were hosting an FGC event I was born and raised in Cincinnati, Ohio. And so there was a local FGC. At the time, I'd say it was like quasi-major, pretty close to being major, called Power Up. That was on the road to Evo. Yeah. So it was one of those qualifying events where you could get like better seating for Evo. Yeah. So I met them, and it was one of those things that I met them at that event in Cincinnati, talked to them, and they're like, hey, we're going to be at UFGT in Chicago coming up. So traveled to UFGT, worked as Gaming Gen, helped produce some like videos and interviews and things like that. And then from there, we just kind of kept touch. And as more events started coming up, I started doing more and more with Gaming Generations up until in 2014, I was working for a logistics company at the time. I was like full bore, like great salary, full benefits. It was one of those things, I'm climbing the corporate ladder.
Yeah.
Everyone else that's above me is like maybe within 5-6 years of retiring. They're much older than I am. And I got a call from Gaming Gen, and they're like, hey, here's the situation. We can bring you on full time, but you're going to make minimum wage, no benefits, but you're going to work events full time in essence. I, at work, hung up that phone call, got on a call with my parents to talk with them, hung up that call, went into my boss's office, and immediately put in my 2 weeks. I was like, no, I had no actual, like, nobody had to coerce me into doing it. I was like, if I don't take this opportunity now, I'm probably going to regret it for the rest of my life. So in 2014, started full-time with Gaming Gen, helped kind of really like establish the events division and did everything like across the board. In 2015, I got an opportunity to work with another company. I actually relocated to Las Vegas. At the time, they were called Pro Gaming League. They rebranded to Millennial Esports. Okay. We built the first purpose-built esports facility in Las Vegas before the esports arena stadium in Luxor was constructed. So one of those things that even though I wasn't Gaming Gen full-time, I still worked with them a lot, and I kept those contacts, and, I've never burnt a bridge. And so was in Vegas for a little bit, took a year. Was 2016 to 2019, I actually stepped away a little bit from esports. I worked for, one of my other passions is tabletop gaming. So like card games, board games, things like that. So I worked for a company called Jasco Games. They're well known for the Universal Fighting System, which is a card game now known as Universes. We had licensing for Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Cowboy Bebop, like, big names. Yeah. But I was still doing like esports on the side and taking a lot of what I learned and helping kind of like bring up the standard for like tabletop events. Yeah. So that was 2019, went back full time to Gaming Gen, and that's where I am now. And kind of like, what I was talking about earlier, like we just did Pokemon this past weekend. We have a team that's doing Lorcana. Like it's, for me personally, like esports has always been like my bread and butter and like kind of where I cut my teeth,
Sure.
so to say. But within the industry as a totality, like we're trying to keep our eyes on what needs the most help, right? Evo is a fantastic event and we've helped them out tremendously and we love working with them.
Yeah.
But at the same time, it's like we've kind of like, we know the bare minimums and what we can do to kind of exceed those expectations. Whereas there's other clients that we're really starting to touch base at a ground level. So that's like a short, I think it's not so short, kind of background on me and my history. Kind of what you asked earlier. I love first-person shooter games, but I will play anything. Yeah. I've run tournaments for just about everything, worked with every, Pokemon, Nintendo, Blizzard, Sony, Microsoft, like every major company that's out there. I've worked with them in some capacity, and it's, just helping everyone out in totality.
Helping everyone out, helping every event grow, and helping each event just do their thing, right? Evo example, like with the recent changes of the last few years, Sony coming in, you guys are still helping, massively involved, I assume, which is amazing. But then again, like with other events, with Pokemon, with Lorcana, the tabletop stuff, that's a whole different sort of ball game. There's less consoles, there's less technical hardware. There's more physical. There's still physical hardware, the cards and mats and whatnot, and everything else. And plus, all the merch you guys sell at every event, like the stores you have every time I come to Combo Breaker, is quite massive. You guys have pretty much anything anyone would want, mainly plushies and hats. But there are other things on the side as well. But the main thing that always stands out to me is all the plushies. So, with you having helped Gaming Gen out for so long and having done so many events, what is your favorite event?
Ooh, are you saying like favorite event like year after year or favorite event in totality?
In totality, just any event, Pokemon, FGC, card games, whatever. What was your favorite event that you remember?
My favorite event, it's interesting because there's this like unique dichotomy, because I get this question a lot, right? I have a lot of people, it's like, even generally like if I'm sitting on the plane and just chatting with somebody, my favorite event personally, like one-off event, it's very close to my heart, and it's one of those things that people are like, oh, you've worked Evo, you've worked the Pokemon World Championships, you've worked, all these big prestigious things that people see, right? That are just carry a lot of weight to them. I have always been a fan of professional wrestling.
Okay.
And in 2019, I was approached by WWE. They wanted to host a Smash Brothers tournament that was also going to be a charity function for the Make-A-Wish program.
Sure.
For anyone that doesn't know, Make-A-Wish works with terminally ill children and in essence helps them with whatever their final wish might be. So one of the director of digital content at WWE, I had kind of crossed paths with them a little bit before, and so they reached out and they're like, hey, we want to do this thing, but it's very non-traditional. Like normally you think of like a Smash tournament, right? And you think of like Friday, Saturday, Sunday, you think of big convention center, you think of like Big House and Genesis and events like that.
Yeah.
This was a very small function. They got some space for one of the meeting rooms from the local college in Connecticut. And I was like, we have this room for 3 hours.
Oh.
Meaning that when doors open to the public, we need to start the tournament and we want to jam as many people in, with the winner getting like prizing supported by WWE. It was like a heavyweight title, a tickets package to an upcoming pay-per-view. Like it was like a pretty hefty, like it was a good amount that they were supplying for the event. But it was like, you need to run a Smash Brothers tournament that has no player cap.
Oh,
and you need to do it in 3 hours.
Oh, no.
So that's one of the things that I've always prided myself on, is really thinking like outside of the box. I've, I don't know if I've ran tournaments for like games like Minesweeper or like Ski Free. I don't know if you remember like back in the day, like free on PC. So it was when they tasked it with me, I was like, is it doable? Yes. I have a lot of questions. And in essence, they were like, "Oh no, like you are running it. Like you
Oh.
do everything you need to. You have carte blanche to do whatever you need to do."
Here's a blank paycheck.
Oh.
Just go do what you want.
Pretty much.
Okay.
Pretty much. And so I partnered with Gaming Gen, and obviously like we got like the consoles for everything we needed. I show up on site and I'm there like a few hours before doors are scheduled to open, and I come up with a format that was, in essence, it was 4-player free for all, where one person would advance in the bracket, which allowed us to help like mitigate that time crunch. Got a lot of negative feedback from the Smash Brothers, community itself. It's like, this isn't the normal way you run a tournament. I go, I understand, but this is also like a charity event. We're trying to just make it happen.
Yeah.
So, on average, it costs around $10,000 to grant a Make-A-Wish.
Okay.
That was our goal. In that period of time, we had all the money that came from registration. People were also making like donations. There was like silent bids on items again supplied by WWE. We raised, it was just over $7,000. So we were a little bit short of our goal.
Sure.
But it was 130 players, somewhere around there, just north of 130 players that got to participate in the tournament. They got to hang out and play casuals. WWE brought out superstar Xavier Woods. He was our MC, did like a lot of photos and meet and greets. So for me, it was one of those things that it was 2 major impacts. One, I got to work with WWE, which was like a lifelong goal, right? I was like,
as a 90s kid, that's like, yeah.
Yeah. And then the other component was like the actual charity function as well. Like we did something that had a positive impact overall. And the third component was like, I did something that I think was relatively, anybody else on paper might be like, that's not possible, or I'm not willing to kind of take that on. And we made it work. So my profile picture across like social media, like my email is a photo of me actually on stage at that event. And I'm wearing a referee uniform that WWE supplied for me. So I got to be an honorary referee because I was running the tournament for the day.
Nice.
I showed up in the YouTube video for the recap. And it's one of those things that no matter how big the scope is, like everybody looks like, the glitz and glamour, the stage, the prestige of winning, world championships. Esports now, we're having multi-million-dollar tournaments.
Yeah.
But for me, like to be able to like, I was trusted with this thing. I literally had a billion-dollar company that I've been a fan of my entire life literally come, hey, here's this thing, go. And, carte blanche from start to finish, I got to run it. That for me is very, very high as far as my favorite event ever.
Hell yeah, that's amazing. And yeah, like as a 90s kid myself, like WWF, WWE, when it got rebranded, I fell out of wrestling only because I don't watch it. That was all like, I didn't grow out of it, but I just stopped watching it because of time differences and whatnot. But yeah, AEW at the moment is popping off, it seems. But yeah, it's just that's an amazing story, and that would probably be top one of anyone's. Like, yeah, there's Evos, there's EWCs and whatnot, but hey, I ran an event to work with my childhood dream wrestling company and help me raise money for charity for terminally sick children. That's amazing. Turning back to gaming generations, like, so you are event organizer, director, manager for Gaming Gen, right?
The proper term is manager.
Yeah.
In some aspects, I am the organizer, but it's more of like, so for instance, like with Combo Breaker, right? Like everybody knows, like Rick is the man. Rick is in charge. We're there to just kind of help make sure everything. I'm definitely not an organizer. I'm more of a manager in that aspect of like, hey, we need to make sure that things are ready for doors to be open.
Yeah. So, Rick is the guy for Evo, for Combo Breaker. You, Mike, being the event manager for Gaming Generation side, at least, for an event like Combo Breaker CEO. Like, this is good. It's a very broad question, and from historic episodes here, people have a title, but that title doesn't cover everything you do. So, as an event manager for Gaming Gen, what do you typically do? Because you're the one running the printers, right? You're not running printers for the badges, for the lanyards. You're not ordering consoles. I'm assuming you're not updating the consoles. That has happened before, I'm sure. especially when patches drop 2 days before an event. The worst. So yeah, what does an event manager for Gaming Gen do?
Yeah, so I think the key phrase there again is manager, right? So like within Gaming Generations, like we have individuals that do like the console prep and updates, meaning that like if we have an event that's coming up that needs, maybe they only need 40 PlayStations, but they need 100 Nintendo Switches that have Smash and all the unlocks and everything on it. They need monitors, they need X, Y, and Z. It's one of those things that like I'm helping facilitate like the rest of the team as far as what we need to do. So like what you were saying, it's like I'm not physically like behind a machine printing out badges, but I'm helping coordinate like with our team, but then also like the vendors that we might be using, like, hey, this is what we need, this is what we need to buy, here's a sample graphic, here's approval on it, things like that. So it's more of like it's kind of like if you think about it more in like warehousing terms, right? So it's like we receive an order, right? We receive an order and it goes, okay, on my order, I have this. Hey guys, we need to make sure by this time on this day, before the truck is ready to leave, we have all of these items. But then also too, that also involves like, that's like the preparatory work, right? So some clients, it's as simple as like, hey, we just want 100 t-shirts made, which means that we're going to produce them, we're going to get them made and then ship them out to them. Or if we have a representative going to that show, put it on the truck, put it on a flight, whatever that may be. But there are other shows that I'm a lot more hands-on with. So coordinating like with the venues, as far as like scheduling, like logistically, like, hey, our trucks are scheduled to show up on this day at this time. What loading dock can they get to? What are procedures? Is there a union at this facility? Are we able to unload and load in ourselves? What is the lighting in the convention center on timers, meaning that when we get there, is it pitch black and we have the lights turned on? Every little facet of pre-planning that goes into the show, but then also too, for the most part, I travel a lot to these shows and being on site and helping be that point of contact. We have a tendency that we like to overpack, kind of overproduce. So we've been a lot of times where, hey, do you need Astro mix amps for your setups? No, it's fine. We don't need those. We'll bring them with. And then it turned into on site. Hey, did you bring those with just in case? And it's like, yeah, we have them. So it's like looking forward and kind of projecting like, what does the client need? What are they requesting? But what also might be missed potentially? How do we get it onto the truck? How do we get it there? How do we load into the venue and set it up? And then how do we pack it up at the end of the show? So again, like you said, like that's just like a small percentage of the things that I'm helping work on. I have an extensive background in broadcast as well. So like working with 10-0 and like working with Level Up and like working with those crews as well. Sometimes the show is just like, hey, can we have you show up and you're a stage manager? Or hey, we're using Gaming Gen equipment, but can you be on site to help with any potential issues or additional equipment and things like that too. So it's a little bit of everything. And I'm starting to like myself personally, like starting to dip my toes into areas I haven't before. I'm starting to do like full CAD drawings of the floor plan, working with a fire marshal to make sure like entry and exit points are like for regulations. Every kind of facet now of the show is, possibility to have my fingerprints on it.
Wow. That's amazing. Especially like from the fire marshal CAD side of the town. Like that can be a lot of work, especially when you're trying to find like floor plans, blueprints, and whatnot of their buildings. So yeah, props to you for learning that because that can be quite difficult. So yeah, you oversee the teams doing a lot of things. You've worked with 10-0, great team, Level Up, great team, and other production companies. They are just I've had Funky P on here from 10-0. So guys, if you haven't listened to that, check that episode out. So overseeing all of this, it's a lot of work. Is it all spreadsheets? I'm not going to ask like what specific software you're going to use, but is it spreadsheets? Is it just timers? Is it is it a 9 to 5 or are we going like full spectrum with like 5 different time zones in the States? Are you just covering whatever you can?
Yeah, it's one of those things that I try and treat it like a 9 to 5, but at the same time too, like you mentioned as well, like for instance, like when I'm working with, either a vendor or like even a convention center that's not in the same time zone, yes, you have to make yourself available. You have to like find out like what time, is available for calls, or even, I just had last week, I literally worked a show, traveled immediately to another convention center the next day, went and did a site visit with them, and then flew home. And the whole time, in the in between, I'm doing emails, I'm taking phone calls. So I try and treat it like it's a 9-to-5 job, but I think it's also, you could view it more of like it's a remote working situation.
Yeah.
So again, you just kind of like work with as much flexibility as you have, because you do have certain metrics and deadlines that you're always trying to hit. And the second you fall behind, now you're behind on everything. So Evan, the owner of Gaming Generations, has told me several times that, he'll be, it's 11 p.m. midnight his time, and he'll just get a call, and it's like, hey, can we order this, and can you have it to us in the next 3 days? And I'm like, yes, let's do it. Let's see what we can make work. So it is kind of an on-call position, because you never know when or how something's going to shape up, and you always want to be ahead of it. Yeah. But at the same time, you kind of can treat it like normal office hours.
Try to, at least. With so much traveling and airtime, you are definitely working whilst on the road. So having done that position myself for numerous times, it's not fun. But if you enjoy what you do it, right? I only have to assume you enjoy what you do, Mike. Otherwise, you wouldn't be traveling back-to-back events, answering phone calls, answering emails whilst on the road. So, question really then is, what is success to you? How do you define success?
So when I was younger and I was running my own events, like I was running like PC LAN parties, that were like not as regular, right? Like when I stepped away from high school, I was hosting them in college, and it wasn't like the first Friday of every month. So for me, the way that I determine success, and this is what I tell a lot of other event organizers, is that if you have someone in the middle of your event, if you have someone come to you and say, when is the next one? I think that's the biggest sign of success. So like, I know like working like with the FGC and like people that are doing like monthlies or like bi-monthlies or events that aren't your just weeklies, right? That are like scheduled, like we know every Thursday at this time, this venue, we're playing Tekken, show up and have fun.
Yeah.
If they're doing like a bi-weekly or if they're doing like a bi-monthly or trying to put together kind of like a major, that for me is the biggest sign of success, is when you have someone who's physically at your event, it's not even done yet, and they're going, this has been incredible. When is this happening again? I think the other aspect of that, for especially the bigger shows, and there's almost like this, I'm trying to think of like the right terminology to put on it. It's very easy for people that are putting the shows together to be putting in a lot of time and effort, meaning that like I could be in the convention center, the day before doors are scheduled to open on that Friday or whenever the event opens. And it's like, I've been there for 18 hours, and it's literally like making sure that everything is buttoned up and last touches, and, is everything from an operational standpoint ready for the tournament, and broadcast and AV and stuff like that. And it's like, there is a certain degree of like, it is very punishing and it is very hard work. But at the same time, that second that doors open and you see smiles on faces, and nobody knows, right? Nobody knows everything that it took to get to that point. That for me is also very gratifying. I've had issues in the past where, in essence, the entire event was on the verge of being jeopardized, but working on it behind the scenes without anybody knowing that there was an issue, and getting it resolved to the point that like, you saved the day, but you don't have the Superman cape on, right? Nobody knows that you had to finagle this thing to make sure that the show is still open and operational. So I think that's the two pieces for me, is that if it's a smaller event and it's a regular event, people telling you on site, hey, you're getting positive feedback, but most importantly, when is this happening again? And then the other component is, if it's a bigger show, like we're talking like an Evo, or even like, trade shows like E3, Gen Con, stuff like that, where people show up and they're just like, wow, this is incredible. And you're sitting there kind of like slumped over, and you're like, thanks for being here.
Hey, that's day 1, 0 hours, hour 1, doors have opened, and you're already slumped in a chair. It's like, It's only just opened. What's happened?
Yeah.
Honestly, yeah. No, I appreciate that. That's a great answer. I think we've answered this one already, so I'm going to have to ask you to think of a different scenario here. Like, what is the most successful thing you've achieved that isn't the Smash WWE charity event?
Interesting. Oh, this is one I didn't really talk about in my previous history. Is that I've always prided myself on being one of those people that is really multifaceted, and even if it's something that if it's a question or concern that's brought to me, if I don't know the answer, I can pass it off to someone who does. But that also instills in me in the future it's something I need to learn.
Yeah.
So for me, there was a program that I helped oversee in 2021. So there's a streaming service called Trovo, and Trovo was launched as kind of a competitor by Tencent to rival Twitch, in essence. And so everybody's familiar usually with Twitch Rivals. It's like this online competitive circuit that they play like different games and different influencers come on, and it's supposed to be like this like means of like boosting up all of those content creators, but then also to like sometimes featuring a game, right? So like Riot will be like, hey, Twitch Rivals, we want to give you advertising money to play Valorant at Twitch Rivals so we get a little more exposure, right? Yeah. So Trovo, with their launch, was coordinating what they called Trovo Titans, which was their version of Twitch Rivals.
Yeah.
This again, like we're still in basically the middle of the pandemic. Got approached about taking the role of being the project manager. And I was helping oversee all operations for North America and Latin America while also working with another company that was doing Europe. And Trovo very specifically was like, we want to do unconventional things. We want tournament formats that are not the normal. We don't want regular esports, right? We want things that are different. And so I not only as the project manager, like helped develop a lot of those like alternative tournament structures, but also was visiting. I was traveling on site to the broadcast location where I was directing. I was making the run of show. I was literally running the broadcast with like a 12-person team, full directing. And then I was also doing social media coordination and like helping sure that we hit our metrics and scheduling and things like that. And again, that was a project that was 9 months in totality. And when I came into it, they were like, you are the project manager. These are the people you're working with to help ensure that everything is successful. And this isn't anything derogatory towards anybody that I was working with, but I had my hands personally on a lot of that stuff just because, again, that was like my sole project at the time, and everyone else was kind of like doing other things. So I had the CEO actually come up to me at one point. It was actually after our first broadcast show, and literally looked me in the face and went, I have never worked with anyone that was able to do all of the things that you are doing. And so for me, that was like not only one, like super positive feedback. All right, got it. I'm doing a good job. I'm glad you guys are happy with me. Yeah. But also two, being multifaceted enough to like oversee and run the entirety of broadcast, social media, tournament structures, working with, the bigger, like we had like prizes that were being given out at the end of the year. So actually like data tracking, like where are players finishing in tournaments, where are they landing on the leaderboards, like every facet of the project. If someone came to me, I could help step in and assist with that. So that was mostly an online digital format, so not necessarily like a live event. But there again, I think it speaks to just kind of the versatility that people can have within this industry. And that's usually one of the biggest pieces of advice that for anybody that's wanting to get into esports or live events, it's like, hey, if you're coming in as this sole lane, that's great, and hyper focus on that, but also learn these other things that are going to not only make you stand out, but also help you down your career path.
For sure, no, damn right. Geez, that's like when you mentioned it was online, that I had an internal sigh of relief, because if that was a live in-person event, that is so much data that you have to look at and deal with, and just all the inputs coming in at you. That, Mike, are we sure you don't have like 2 sets of extra hands behind you? Like how many laptops were you running at the same time? Because that's just so much going on. But an online format, it has its own challenges, but does make it slightly easier with the flow of information coming in at you. Personally, I'd say that's true. You could tell me otherwise compared to offline events. But does Trello still exist? Because they were here in the UK at one point. I have a hoodie from them somewhere. And then I've not seen them since. Do you know if they're still around?
So Trovo does still exist. For reference, they're actually owned by Tencent. Like a lot of people are familiar with Tencent as a publishing company. So they are still around. They didn't continue the Trovo Titans program, which was a little bit of a bummer, having put in all that time and effort into like creating a successful program, hitting all the metrics they wanted, and then just kind of being like, nah, we're not going to renew it. So they are still around, but that's also kind of the nature of the business, unfortunately, is especially within esports, is a company could be here and be very successful, and then literally overnight they're gone. So.
Yeah, it's a flash in the pan, literally sometimes. There's so many events up and go, get created one day and then just disappear the next. It's sad to see, especially with so many, with so many events that are coming back since the pandemic, and Capcom Pro Tour trying to come with everyone trying to convince Capcom to bring back offline premieres. More offline events is better in my eyes. Just to show, just for people to turn up, have a good time. Online is one thing, offline is a completely different beast. Speaking of offline, I'm going to roll back to the initial question that I thought of when we started this episode, with obviously consoles having the same structure, the same format, everything is the same, and then PC gaming coming into play for fighting game events. What's your thoughts on PC gaming as the console of choice as such?
Yeah, I grew up as a PC kid.
Yeah.
We had consoles in our household, but I always gravitated towards PC. The phrase that I use all the time is competitive integrity. Obviously with PCs, it's a lot harder, only because there are so many facets, with like driver updates and, the physical hardware itself. There was recently it was an Apex Legends event where they were literally in the middle of a round, and one of the players called for a technical timeout, and upon inspection, their video card was actually not the same as all the other video cards that were on the tournament floor. So there again, it's like, in that situation, like, what do we do? We're in the middle of the tournament. We obviously need to get them a new PC. We need to get them up to snuff, but what do we do about the previous games? Like, there are logistically a lot of different headaches that happen with it. I know that I've talked a lot with Jimmy Nguyen from Level Up and Alex Valle, and they were kind of pushing PC a long time ago, and they're like, hey, we should experiment with this. They partnered with Alienware. I don't want to say that it's inevitable, but when you look at it from, especially with fighting games specifically, right? You want the best frame data, you want the best resolution. Right now, PC is that platform, but I don't know what that looks like in the future. There's been multiple conversations that I've been part of internally,
of course,
and I think there's definitely major benefits for switching over to PC. I just don't know that that'll be happening anytime soon from a major competitive standpoint.
Yeah.
Sony just announced the PlayStation 5 Pro. We're going to be looking into that. There's obviously, new benchmarks that we're hoping to hit. But even that, if we're staying with console, like the in-zone monitors have been phenomenal.
Yeah.
But are there monitors that might be better? There's always conversations happening about how do we future-proof the most? And so for me personally, I'm still very much weighing on the pros of, I like making the change to PC, but we're not quite ready due to all of its hiccups and cons that kind of come with it.
It's nuances.
It's in the conversation. I just don't know if/when that could happen.
Cool. Okay, no, that's fair. And this is a question where you can tell me to go away, because it might be company secrets. But is Gaming Generation able to provide PCs currently?
Full transparency, right? We currently we do not have PCs. but we have other partners that we work with. Like we've had like general like Comic Cons come up to us and they're like, hey, we want to rent consoles and we want to rent PCs. So even though we can't rent the PCs, we help direct them to those other vendors, those other partners we've worked with in the past. So can Gaming Generations currently facilitate those PCs? No, but we can at least help events with getting their needs filled.
Good. I'm glad to hear that. Not because you can't provide the PCs, but helping everyone else out. Your partners, you people you've worked with before. If all like a rising tide raises all ships. I think that's one of, I'm going to say a Rickism. That's the first time I've ever heard someone say it. And if I eventually get Rick on, that's definitely one question. That where does he find all these quotes he gets from? But so PC gaming aside, PC gaming myself, I do like PC. I also have a console. You mentioned PS5 Pro. Good luck to everyone trying to buy one. That is 7 bags for an individual to purchase. I'm not sure how a company like yourselves, maybe you might get a discount from someone somewhere. I'm sure there's a corporate discount wholesaler of console somewhere, which we don't have to talk about. So Gaming Generation has attended numerous fighting game events. Like we've mentioned, Combo Breaker, CEO, Genesis, The Big House. Yeah, you guys are pretty much everywhere within the United States. You guys have a stall within all these majors in the United States. How would someone be able to help you guys in, say, manning a stall?
You mean like the physical brick and mortar or like a booth at one of the shows?
A booth. No, the physical brick and mortar, that can be a different question. But as a booth in a show, like how would someone be able to message Gaming Generations? Not you specifically, Mike. Gaming Generations as a whole. So how can I help? Like, do you guys need a hand? Like, I can help be a seller, basically.
Yeah, so we've had people actually like they'll reach out to us ahead of time or even like physically at a show, just be like, oh hey, do you guys ever need help with anything? I'd love to get more involved. I think the easiest method right now would just be like send us a DM via Twitter or X, whatever it's called now. We also have on our website, gaminggenerations.com. There should be, I know there's a general email, but I can't think of it off the top of my head.
Sure.
It might be like contact at Gaming Generations or something like that. But for anybody that wants to help, like with not just like the booth operations, but also like event things as well, we're always open and encouraging for anybody to reach out. There's maybe either one trying to get their foot in the door and maybe like look at this as like longevity of like, kind of kickstarting their career, but also too like, hey, I'm going to be at the event. I'll be there early. If you need help with anything, like let me know. So yeah, I would say that's the best means of reaching out. Or if you're at the show, just come stop by and say, hey, and we'll let you know.
Cool. Awesome. That's good. Because I will definitely, now that I've spoken to you on this podcast, next Combo Breaker, if you're there, I will swing by and say hi and say what's good. So with your role as event manager in Gaming Gen, like you have a team of people that report to you being a manager. How did you build that team? Like, what do you look for in people to build that team to help support you and the company, and you support them?
Yeah, we've so kind of to circle back a little bit, like we said, like we've had a lot of people that have kind of reached out to us over the years. Typically, it's usually people that are at events that kind of like, oh, hey, I'm here, but I'm interested in maybe like helping you guys or maybe go to more events. Specifically, the things that I look for are like people that are, pretty well versed with event operations. Not to saying that you can have zero knowledge, but like people that already kind of have like a general knowledge of like, hey, this is the needs that we need to meet, and these are the goals that we need to achieve. But then also too that are flexible. With a lot of those things, some of them might be, hey, I need you to sit at this table and you're updating 100 consoles, go. Or it might be, hey, we're setting up 300 monitors, like go ahead and start on that. Or we're setting up the booth or whatever it may be. Like there's a lot of pivoting that has to happen with events. So that's usually one of the key kind of features that I'm looking for in individuals. And then also too, it's usually, with the question you asked before, it's usually the people that ask. right? Like we want to give opportunities for people that are inquisitive, that are inquiring about wanting to help out at events. You know, we've had people, for instance, at like Combo Breaker, that's like, hey, I'm going to be a player and competitor on Friday, Saturday, and Sunday, but if you need someone to come in early, like I could help you guys with setup on Thursday. I could stay late until Monday. Like, you know, it's one of those things that we want to give opportunities for the people that are asking about them, but more importantly, those people that want to kind of grow and learn themselves. So we have not really like a concrete like onboarding process, but like I know that like at other shows, we've had people come up to us, you know, on Sunday and be like, hey, do you guys need help with like teardown at all? Is there anything I can help you guys with? And while that's appreciated, we don't want to view it as like we're not our business isn't backed by volunteer labor, right? Like we don't want we don't want to be like, you know, you're like, hey, we're showing up and we need 10 volunteers that are going to help us with stuff. No, like we want to make sure that we're doing everything by the book. People are being compensated appropriately, you know, and we're creating those opportunities. You know, I've had people come to me that are like, hey, I really want to work Evo. And then they come and they work Evo. And then that turns into, hey, do you want to do Big House? Do you want to do Combo Breaker? Do you want to do this event? Like, you want to do San Diego Comic-Con? Like, and creating those opportunities. Because usually I feel like people kind of almost, not saying this is like derogatory, but they kind of have like blinders on, right? Yeah. Like if you only know the FGC, if you only know tabletop gaming, that's usually the lane you want to stay in. And it's more about, we're trying to teach you, we're trying to give you the fundamentals that are going to help you with everything across the board. But more importantly, if an opportunity does come up where it's like, hey, we have Anime Expo and we're supplying consoles and we're building 3 or 4 of the booths, is that something that you think is within your wheelhouse that you're capable of learning and doing? So it's people from all walks of life that, you know, we're also trying to work with as well. So I would say never be afraid to ask for that opportunity and never try and like pigeonhole yourself, right? Like, hey, I want to go to Evo and I want to work Evo. Okay, well, what if Evo is already full? What if we don't need any additional team members there? What if, you know, we don't have those opportunities? What else would you like to see come down the road?
Yeah, that makes sense. And good to know as well for even for myself. Like if I ever make it not to Combo Breaker but to another event, US major, I will hit you guys up. Like, hey, I'm going to be coming in early. If you want a jet lagged person helping you set up consoles, I'm more than happy to do it. But that's cool. That's awesome. And guys, if you are still listening, please, you know, if you want to get your foot in the door, even I say even at the basics, but at the not from a local perspective, but you know, helping set up the quantity like a major has, like a Combo Breaker, which is in the hundreds. This sounds like a good opportunity to step up and be paid for your time. I won't say how much because that's not my position. But yeah, be paid for your time to help out and be part of something of a great team. Gaming Generations has helped out so many US majors. And you might get the opportunity to go to an Evo or Anime Expo or San Diego Comic-Con. That's, you know, that's from how you described it, working in my eyes backwards, because, you know, people work up to work at Evo. You don't go straight to Evo and then come to other things, which is amazing. So what your role as a whole, you've done on so many hats in your role with Gaming Gen. You've done so many different events, done so many amazing things. But what is one thing you want people to know that is not general knowledge of the things you do for an event, for a fighting game event? I'll pigeon this whole slightly, just so that makes it hopefully slightly easier for you to answer. Like, for a fighting game event for yourself and all Gaming Generations, like, what is one thing you think people don't know but should know about what you guys do?
I had this conversation recently with a colleague, and we were trying to actually crunch the numbers and run the math. So I'm going to give this as like a base estimate, but in essence, for every hour that the show is open, on average, there's 100 hours of planning that goes into that show, right? So, like, for instance, like if we're talking about a show like Evo, right? Evo had close to 1,000 consoles that needed updates, game installs, DLC, things like that. When you update a console at your house, like when you get home from work or whatever, and you turn on your console and like, oh, Street Fighter has an update. Okay, it's going to take maybe 4 or 5 minutes. I'm going to use the restroom, maybe get a drink. I'm going to grab something to eat. I'm going to scroll on my phone, right? You have to kind of sit there and wait for that. Well, imagine doing that now times 1,000.
Yeah.
And like you mentioned before, like the releases of content do not always align with event dates, So as much prep as we can do in the warehouse ahead of the show, when you show up on site, there could be an update, there could be a patch. And it's one of those things that while those items are physically in a truck transporting from point A to point B, you're going to have to touch base on them again. So that's just one thing. Also talking about, like we talked about before, like, even like the registration process, right? Like opening registration, doing the seating of brackets, manufacturing, the branding for commentator backdrops, for stages, actually getting the AV, lighting, trussing, getting that all rented, but then also plotted on the floor plan, doing the floor plan itself. That I think is the biggest component, is that and again, like you have to take everything with a grain of salt, especially on social media. But when it's like you see this negative feedback and it's like, you guys are dumb, why didn't you do this? And it's like, okay, well, it's not just you open the doors and the show is ready. Like there are so many moving parts behind the scenes that the general public, one, is not aware of, and two, I don't know they ever will be. I've teased with another colleague. We've talked about actually live streaming, like setups of one, like literally strapping like a GoPro on my head, and like literally you could just watch the 24-hour stream of like everything that goes into like setting up the event and everything. But I think that's one of the biggest components, is that people, the general public has a tendency to kind of like, it's one of those things I alluded to earlier. We don't necessarily want people to know, like, yep, I just hit hour 23 on the convention floor and doors are going to be opening in 25 minutes, right? We don't want people to know about that, because it's all about the magic, right? Like when you walk into that venue and everything is set up, ready to go, that's all you see. But the work that goes into it, not even physically being on site, but everything like year round, or, as the event planning is going on, it takes so long. And the bigger the show is and the more moving parts there are, creates that many more strings that you need to button up as you're getting closer and closer to the show.
Oh, for sure. That's I think definitely in episode 1 of this podcast, I had a friend of mine, Mark, on, and he describes himself. He's an event manager. He runs a few of locals and majors in the UK, and he does say, like, the experience that he wants to create is a player experience. You want to have the best experience. And so, having this podcast, behind the stage, looking behind the curtains of what you guys do. I don't do anything. I'm just a lowly photographer. So I see I see slightly behind the stage, but I see what's going on during the event. Just shining some light on you guys. You guys need to get the recognition you guys deserve, especially because of how much work everyone puts in to make an event run, no matter how long. Hundreds of hours, pre-planning, planning, to actually doing the event, to pack down, to getting back home, to reset, debrief, and do it all over again for a different event, especially a company at your size, as Gaming Generation size, is amazing. So you guys do definitely put in the hours and the work. So Mike, thank you very much for all the work you do. Pretty much that's all the questioning I have. There probably is some questions I have missed out. But in the meantime, Mike, where can people find you? Anything you want to promote? Anything you want to shout out? Like, where can people? What's the next event people might see you at? I know you're a very busy man, so they might not see you behind the stage.
Yeah, the easiest way to reach me currently is on X. My handle is at the Mohawk Mike. Also, I have I just want to say this as well, is like I'm a completely open book. Unless if I'm specifically signed to like an NDA agreement. If anybody ever has any questions or is looking for insight or maybe even contacts with like other people in the industry, feel more than fine to reach out with me. I've one of my other points of pride is like helping create opportunities for other people. So if anybody ever has questions or if they're looking for insight, I'm more than happy to help out with that. So again, the Mohawk Mike on X. I'm also on Facebook. If you put my last name is Bisson, Bisson, you can find me, Mike Bisson, on Facebook. Those are usually the things that track the fastest. And then once we establish that communication, I can share with you an email and we can start chatting more. But yeah, the biggest takeaway at the end of the day for me personally is full transparency. I feel like I've kind of lost the like full scope of just kind of like how lucky I am to be in the role and the position I'm in. You know, again, like as someone who started organizing and running events at a very young age and kind of just naturally progressed into this career that I have, you know, it's hard sometimes to kind of like fully grasp, I recently had a stretch in the back of July where I had 9 events straight back to back to back to back. And it's like going from things like Evo to San Diego Comic-Con to the Pokemon World Championships to, you know, all of these events that, you know, people save up all year to go to. Like they're highly favorable events and destinations. And for me, it's like I walk in and, you know, I'm helping run the show, you know. So definitely I'd love to be able to like stop and smell the roses, but more importantly, like I've never lost scope of, you know, I went a couple weeks ago to a local event here in Albuquerque where I live. You know, I support my locals. I'm helping those people with, you know, getting the additional equipment they might need or things like that. You know, it's at the end of the day, I just love creating opportunities for people. Again, like it's for me, it's a sense of human interest and bonding, right? So whether that's an event for, you know, it's a Smash Brothers tournament at the local college and they're anticipating like 40 players, or if I'm going to an event like Evo, you know, which is the largest open bracket esports tournament of all time, you kind of want to treat them all with the same respect and dignity that they all have and deserve. You know, if you want to host an event and you want to create these opportunities for people, you have to remember that that's the reason you're doing it, right? There's so many people that I've come across in this industry, specifically esports, they just see dollar signs. And once that money is either gone or it becomes too much work, they just abandon ship and that's it, right? So we're all in the thick of this together, and it's not just the people that are helping run the events, organize the events, it's also the attendees as well. Always provide feedback if you ever have anything that you think is an oversight or might help improve the show. You know, again, like, you know, me personally, I can't be everywhere at once. So having people come to me and say, hey, this was an issue I noticed, or hey, like maybe in the future, if you could do this, like it's not falling on deaf ears. Like we want to make the best attendee experience as possible, but also like we don't want for lack of a better term, we don't want a black eye on this big event that we're trying to run, you know, right? Like, yeah. You know, you come to the end of the weekend and you're like, oh man, that was incredible. And, you know, everything ran on time and you're feeling like really accomplished. And then that Dexerto article comes out and you're like, oh no, everything's wrong. It's overshadowed. This is the worst event ever in the history of the world. You know, You got to take that with a grain of salt and you got to learn. You got to learn from your mistakes. Not every event is going to be perfect. And I have really high standards, and very seldom are those standards met. But more importantly, you identify things that will help you learn to move forward in the future. So again, I've been through the ringer. I've been doing this very long. If anybody has any questions, please do not hesitate. Reach out, even if it's not for gaming generations. If it's just something a little more personal, like, hey, I'm trying to get more into streaming and I'm wanting to stream my locals. Like, you know, can you help with that? Or is there someone that can help with that? Do you have equipment recommendation? Things like that. Like, we're all, at the end of the day, we're still very much in the Wild West. Oh, yeah. There is no, you know, procedurally right or wrong way to do things. And so any help that we can provide one another, that's what we need at the end of the day to sustain this growth.
Definitely 100%. And yeah, just a reminder, listeners, feedback, please make sure it's constructive. Don't just say it's bad. That doesn't help anyone. You could say it's bad, but why was it bad for you in particular? Definitely helps in event runners, in people like Mike and Rick and everyone else that I've had on this podcast, understand where you're coming from with context of why it wasn't a great show for them in that particular region. Just saying it's bad doesn't help anyone. I do have one final question, so I jumped the gun because you just reminded me. People, you say you're an open book, which is amazing. Thank you, being so open to answer people's questions and opening your Twitter, your social media to people to hound you with questions. Like, what would you recommend people do to build themselves up to get into your position of where you are right now? Like, we've from the 90s of running a monthly in the science lab, running a Doom event, to now basically helping out probably one of the companies that help create majors run successfully. Like, what do you do? What would you recommend for them to do now to start their career path?
I'm going to preface this with I personally, I'm not like a big sneakerhead, but I always point to Nike and their slogan, "Just do it." Literally, just do it. Obviously, don't have pie in the sky like, oh, I'm going to run a 3,000 person tournament and it's my first time running a tournament. No, what I mean is that if you want to run an event, if you want to organize something, do it, because it doesn't matter where you start. It matters what mistakes you make and how you learn and grow from those. So I've had people that have reached out to me that it's like, oh man, if you ran a Call of Duty tournament, I can guarantee 500 players are going to show up. Okay, well, if you can guarantee that, why don't you run it? Why don't you? How can I help you to get to that point? Let's find a venue. Let's see what it takes for equipment. Like, let's get you set up so that this is something that you can champion and you can run and you have the vision for, rather than passing it to me and being like, hey, can you do this? Can you run this? So there are a lot of resources out there that you can use, whether it be your local school, which is how I got started. Even if it's something as simple as like, hey, can we have access to space? Can we use the gymnasium? Can we use the cafeteria? Whatever that may be. Your local library. I think people would be shocked to know that you could host events at your library. Obviously, you want them to fall within certain guidelines and be constructive to what that facility is. But, there are places, I'm being born and raised in Ohio. I feel like we had the benefit of like having that super do-it-yourself attitude. I've attended locals at pizza shops, in the dining rooms at fast food restaurants. Like I've, eat like a Denny's, like a restaurant, like, it's one of those things that like use the resources that are around you. But more importantly, like you were saying, it's like, if you want to do something, like do it, like set your goals. Maybe your vision is you want to be here within a certain number of years. You want to run that 3,000 person tournament. Start running your weeklies, start running your bi-weeklies, monthlies, whatever that may be. And more importantly, like once you get into it, make mistakes, go into it knowing you're going to make mistakes, but most importantly, learn from those. So, I think we live in a time and an age where that's very also easy to do online. I see people all the time. I get almost a link every single day for a new Discord. It's like, hey, this is this region's Discord for Street Fighter, or hey, this is this Discord for running Dungeons and Dragons campaigns, or whatever it may be. There are so many more tools and utilities that you can use to start now than I and a lot of my colleagues ever had younger growing up. Find people with common interest. Don't be afraid to just get started. And like I said before, the slogan, just do it.
Just do it.
Just start.
Yeah, true. No, amazing words. Honestly, definitely resonates with me. Just do it. One phrase I personally use always is done is better than perfect. Like if you aim for perfect, if you wait for perfect, you will never achieve it. So just do it. Just do it and get it done. Like perfect will come. And as Mike said, like realizing you will make mistakes. That is what makes us human. That is what makes you a better person and a better event next time. Mike, that is my last question. I'll ask one more time though. Is there any parting words you want to impart before we finish this off for today?
Yeah, I'm curious, Drift. Now that you've started this series, I feel like we talked about, just the slogan, just do it. Like, I love the fact that you've started this series, that you've reached out to people to have as guests on here on the show. Like, what is kind of your vision with this show going forward? And more importantly, like, I know you're doing photography at events. What are you also wanting to do in the future?
Oh, well, this podcast, I'm not sure how long it will last, but I'm going to keep writing and keep finding people to talk to. This came about because of seeing Esteban, the Best Esteban's tweet, where he and his team had a slog, much like yourself, of back-to-back events from Combo Breaker to Evo. They're a smaller in team, and they were all burnt out. So trying to show light on people like them and like yourselves to help events grow and make new events come up, and show the value of offline events as well, is my idea behind this podcast. Like, people turn up to events, the Twitter warriors, the Xerto websites, articles, or bad-mouthing events. They sometimes don't understand what work needs to be done to make a great event. Sofa coaches, like when you're watching football, and you say you can do a better play, like, show me you can do a better play. You're just saying that, otherwise it's just wrong. So that's the reason behind this podcast. But for me personally, my goal still is, keep making photography my main role. At the moment, it's not. But the the side goals at the moment, make it to Evo as an event photographer, make it back to Combo Breaker as an event photographer, just cover esports, cover photography, cover those stories that we develop and should have in the fighting game scene, and wider, because it's a community, it's a family. Like, I've made so many friends, post pandemic, before, and having met so many wonderful people in the States and across the world, through fighting games. I want to show love to everyone. So that's the only reason I keep. That's the only reason I keep doing it. That is a reason I keep doing it. And photography turned from a hobby, turned into this, and trying to make myself a professional photographer. Eventually, it might happen one day. Who knows? But for now, I'm running this podcast just to show light on people that have made it into their career paths and doing wonderful things, like yourself, Mike. So that's the short story for me. I'm mainly behind the camera, or behind the microphone. This is being behind the stage with Mike. Thank you guys very much, and I will catch you in the next episode. Peace.